Welcome. Today we're not just watching a story, we're solving a puzzle. The subject of this video is one of the most famous people to ever live, but you won't hear their name until the very end. I will tell you their complete true life story, and every detail I share is a potential clue. Your challenge is to use those clues to figure out who it is before the final reveal. Think of it as the ultimate test of historical knowledge and observation. Let's begin the unnamed biography now. Part 1. The Humble Beginnings. Our story begins on a cold morning in the early 19th century, in a remote one-room log cabin in what was then a newly admitted state in the American South. The year was 1809, and the circumstances of his birth were about as far from privilege as one could imagine. His parents were struggling farmers, part of that hardy, westward-looking population carving out a life from raw wilderness. His father, a carpenter and farmer, was largely uneducated, a trait he unfortunately shared with his first wife, our subject's mother. She was described as a thoughtful but melancholic woman, deeply religious, who instilled in her son a strong moral compass despite the harshness of their daily existence. The cabin where he drew his first breath was in Hodgenville, Kentucky, a place of fertile land but also of deep divisions, even in those nascent years of the nation. It was a region where the institution of slavery was deeply ingrained, a societal norm that would shape and ultimately define much of our subject's adult life and monumental achievements. He was born into a family with modest aspirations, far from the halls of power or the intellectual circles of the East Coast. His earliest years were marked by migration, a common theme for frontier families seeking better land and opportunity. When he was just 7 years old, his family packed up their meager belongings and moved. They crossed the Ohio River, leaving Kentucky behind for the free territory of Indiana. This move wasn't just about finding better soil, it was a testament to his father's deep-seated opposition to slavery. Though not an abolitionist in the firebrand sense, his father found the system morally repugnant and sought to raise his family where such human bondage was not practiced. This early exposure to the stark contrast between slave and free territories would plant an indelible seed in the young boy's mind. Life in Indiana was even harder than in Kentucky. The wilderness was dense, and the struggle for survival was constant. He lost his beloved mother when he was only 9 years old to a mysterious illness known as milk sickness, a devastating blow that left a profound void. The death of his mother plunged his father into a deep depression, and the family spiraled into disarray. Their home became cold, neglected, and joyless. It was a bleak period, marked by sorrow and profound loss. The landscape of his youth was one of constant physical labor, clearing land, splitting logs, plowing fields. Formal schooling was a luxury, not a given. In total, he would receive no more than a year of formal education, gathered in scattered weeks and months, taught in crude log schoolhouses. Yet, even with this limited schooling, his intellect shone through. He possessed an insatiable curiosity and a profound love for books, often walking miles to borrow them. He would read by the flickering light of the fireplace, devouring every text he could get his hands on, from the Bible to Aesop's fables, from the works of Shakespeare to biographies of great American figures. These self-taught lessons would prove far more impactful than any formal education he might have received. When he was a young man, almost 21, the family moved yet again, this time to Illinois. It was here, in the small community of New Salem, that he truly began to forge his own path. He was tall, incredibly strong from years of physical labor, and possessed a dry wit that made him a popular figure. He worked a variety of odd jobs: flatboatman, store clerk, postmaster, surveyor, all the while continuing his voracious self-education. It was during these formative years that he earned a nickname that would stick with him, a testament to his strength and his humble origins: the Rail Splitter. Clue number 1. Born in Kentucky, family moved to Indiana, then Illinois. Nicknamed the Rail Splitter. Part 2. The Self-Made Man and Early Ambitions. As he settled in Illinois, his natural intelligence and keen sense of justice quickly became apparent. He wasn't content with merely earning a living. He yearned for something more, something that would allow him to use his intellect and his oratorical skills. He immersed himself in law, often borrowing books from local lawyers and teaching himself the intricacies of legal precedent and argument. Despite his lack of formal training, he passed the bar examination and began practicing law. quickly earning a reputation for his honesty, his shrewd legal mind, and his ability to communicate complex ideas in simple, compelling language. His legal career wasn't limited to the courtroom. He became known for riding the judicial circuit, traveling from county to county with other lawyers and judges, trying cases in rural communities. This experience not only honed his legal skills, but also connected him with the common people of Illinois, allowing him to understand their concerns and aspirations. His ambitions, however, extended beyond the law. He recognized that the political arena offered a platform to address the issues that truly mattered to him. His political journey began humbly, with a failed bid for the Illinois General Assembly when he was just 23. Undeterred, he ran again and won 2 years later, serving multiple terms in the state legislature. During this time, he distinguished himself as a Whig, a party that advocated for economic modernization, internal improvements, and a strong federal government. His political philosophy was rooted in the idea of opportunity for all, a stark contrast to the entrenched systems of privilege he witnessed. He was particularly concerned with the burgeoning issue of internal improvements, canals, roads, and railroads, believing they were essential for the economic development of Illinois and the nation. It was also during these early political years that he met and fell in love with a bright, educated, and socially prominent young woman from a wealthy Kentucky family. Her name was Mary Todd. Their courtship was tempestuous, marked by fiery passion and dramatic arguments, reflecting the strong personalities of both. Despite their differences, they married in 1842, and she would become a pivotal, albeit often troubled figure in his life, providing both intellectual companionship and immense personal sorrow. They would go on to have 4 sons, only one of whom would live to adulthood, a source of unimaginable grief that would haunt them both throughout their lives. This personal experience with profound loss would instill in him a deep empathy and resilience that would later be crucial in the face of national tragedy. He eventually sought a larger stage for his political ambitions, running for and winning a seat in the United States House of Representatives in 1846. His time in Washington, D.C. was notable, though perhaps not for the reasons he expected. He was a vocal critic of the Mexican-American War, believing it to be an unjust conflict prosecuted to expand slavery. This stance was unpopular in many quarters and contributed to his decision not to seek re-election. His single term in Congress proved to be a learning experience, exposing him to the complexities of national politics and solidifying his moral opposition to the expansion of slavery. After his term ended, he returned to Illinois, immersing himself in his law practice, though the call of politics would never truly leave him. He spent the next several years as a highly successful circuit lawyer, traveling across Illinois, arguing cases, and earning a comfortable living. He also developed a reputation as a masterful storyteller, using anecdotes and humor to disarm opponents and connect with juries. Clue number 2. Practiced law in Illinois, served in the state legislature, and 1 term in the U.S. House. Married Mary Todd, known for his circuit riding. Part 3. The Rising Tide of Conflict. The decade of the 1850s saw the United States grappling with an issue that threatened to tear it apart: slavery. The delicate balance between free and slave states, maintained for decades by various compromises, began to unravel with increasing speed and intensity. The acquisition of vast new territories from the Mexican-American War reignited the furious debate over whether slavery would be allowed to expand into these lands. It was a question that touched the very foundation of American democracy and morality. Our subject, who had largely retreated from national politics, could no longer remain silent. The passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854 was the catalyst that pulled him back into the political fray. This act allowed settlers in these new territories to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery, effectively repealing the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which had prohibited slavery north of the 36 degrees 30 minutes parallel. To him, this was an outrage, a dangerous expansion of a morally reprehensible institution. He saw the Kansas-Nebraska Act as a betrayal of the nation's founding principles, a step backward for freedom. He argued that the Founding Fathers, while tolerating slavery in their time, had hoped it would eventually wither away. This new legislation, he believed, ensured its perpetuation and expansion. His impassioned speeches against the act propelled him back into the political spotlight in Illinois. He was not an abolitionist who demanded immediate emancipation for all slaves. but he was fiercely opposed to the expansion of slavery into new territories. He believed that if slavery could be contained, it would eventually die out, preserving the Union in the process. This nuanced but firm stance resonated with many in the North who were increasingly uneasy with the peculiar institution, but feared the radicalism of outright abolition. The Whig Party, unable to reconcile its internal divisions over slavery, collapsed. A new political force emerged, united by its opposition to the expansion of slavery, the Republican Party. Our subject, a former Whig, quickly became a prominent figure in this new party, helping to shape its platform and articulate its core principles. He saw the Republican Party as the last best hope for preventing the nation from becoming entirely a slave-holding republic. He knew that the ultimate battle for the soul of the nation was looming. His growing prominence in the Republican Party led to a series of historic debates in 1858 with the incumbent senator from Illinois, Stephen A. Douglas. These were not ordinary political debates. They were intellectual duels, attracting national attention and shaping the discourse on slavery. In 7 different Illinois towns, he and Douglas engaged in fierce arguments over popular sovereignty, Douglas's idea that settlers could choose, on slavery, versus his own insistence that slavery was morally wrong and should not be allowed to expand. Though he lost the Senate race to Douglas, these debates elevated his national profile immensely. His clear, logical arguments, his moral clarity, and his folksy but profound rhetoric made him a voice to be reckoned with. He eloquently articulated the fundamental contradiction of a nation founded on liberty but steeped in slavery. By 1859, the nation was a powder keg. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, an attempt to spark a slave uprising, further inflamed tensions between North and South. The stage was set for the most consequential presidential election in American history, an election where the very future of the Union was at stake. Our subject, now a national figure, was being talked about as a potential candidate for the Republican nomination. His journey from a log cabin in Kentucky to a national political stage, almost exclusively on the strength of his intellect and moral conviction, was nothing short of remarkable. Clue number 3. Opposed Kansas-Nebraska Act, joined the new Republican Party. Debated Stephen A. Douglas for a Senate seat in Illinois. Part 4. The Path to Presidency. The year 1860 dawned with an ominous cloud hanging over the United States. The political landscape was fractured, the rhetoric increasingly volatile, and the bonds of unity strained to their breaking point. The upcoming presidential election was not just about electing a leader, it was a referendum on the very existence of the Union itself. The Democratic Party was hopelessly split between Northern and Southern factions, effectively guaranteeing their defeat. The Republican Party, less than a decade old, gathered in Chicago for its national convention, a city known for its bustling commerce and its strategic location in the rapidly growing Midwest. Our subject, despite his rising profile, was still considered a dark horse candidate. He wasn't as well known as some of the more established figures like William Seward of New York, a powerful senator with a strong abolitionist lean. However, his unique appeal began to gather momentum. He was from a crucial swing state, Illinois, and his humble origins and rail-splitter image made him relatable to the common man. Critically, his stance on slavery was firm, no expansion into new territories, but not as radical as some abolitionists, making him more palatable to moderate Northerners who feared immediate emancipation. His campaign managers were shrewd, emphasizing his integrity, his eloquence, and his deep understanding of constitutional law. They also played to the practical advantages, his lack of a long controversial national record compared to Seward, and his ability to unite different factions of the new Republican Party. After several ballots, the convention delivered a surprise. Against all odds, the former frontier lawyer and one-term congressman secured the Republican Party's nomination for President of the United States. The election campaign was brutal, unlike any before it. There were 4 major candidates: our subject for the Republicans, Stephen A. Douglas for the Northern Democrats, John C. Breckinridge for the Southern Democrats, and John Bell for the Constitutional Union Party Southern Democrats, and John Bell for the Constitutional Union Party. The electoral map was starkly divided. Our subject didn't even appear on the ballot in many southern states. The South made it clear, if he were elected, secession was inevitable. He refused to compromise on the core principle of non-expansion of slavery, believing that to do so would betray the promise of the Declaration of Independence and doom the Republic. On November 6, 1860, the results came in. Despite winning less than 40% of the popular vote, he won a clear majority in the Electoral College, sweeping the northern states. His victory, however, was immediately met with the grave threat that had been looming for years. South Carolina, true to its word, seceded from the Union in December, even before he could take office. Over the next few months, 6 more southern states followed suit, forming the Confederate States of America. The nation was fracturing, and the man who had risen from poverty to the highest office in the land now faced the greatest crisis in American history. He understood the immense burden that had fallen upon his shoulders. His journey from a log cabin to the White House was a testament to the American ideal of upward mobility. But he was inheriting a nation on the brink of civil war, a stark contrast to the promise of unity that his election should have represented. Clue number 4. Elected president in 1860 as a Republican. His election directly led to the secession of southern states. Inauguration in Washington, D.C. A quick thought here. The mere fact of a president being elected and facing secession might lead you to several figures. But remember the earlier clues. Keep connecting the dots. Part 5. Commander-in-Chief of a Divided Nation. He was inaugurated as the 16th President of the United States on March 4, 1861, standing before a nation tearing itself apart. His inaugural address was a plea for unity, a powerful appeal to the better angels of our nature. But it also firmly stated that the Union was perpetual and that he would preserve it. He inherited a deeply fractured government and an unprepared military. Less than 6 weeks later, on April 12, 1861, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, marking the official start of the American Civil War. The ultimate test of his leadership, and indeed of the American experiment, had begun. His presidency during the war was marked by unimaginable challenges. He had to learn to be a wartime commander-in-chief on the job, often clashing with his generals, searching desperately for competent military leadership. The early years of the war were disastrous for the Union, with a series of demoralizing defeats that tested the nation's resolve and his own patience. He faced immense pressure from all sides: radical Republicans who demanded immediate emancipation, conservative Unionists who feared it, and a war-weary public. He understood that the war, initially fought solely to preserve the Union, had to evolve to include a moral dimension. On September 22, 1862, after the Union's strategic victory at the Battle of Antietam, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This groundbreaking executive order declared that all enslaved people in Confederate states, states then in rebellion, were free. While it didn't immediately free anyone in Union slave states or Confederate areas already under Union control, it fundamentally changed the nature of the war. It transformed the conflict from one solely about preserving the Union into a fight for human freedom, giving the Union cause a powerful moral purpose and discouraging foreign intervention on behalf of the Confederacy. This was a radical step, but one he believed was militarily necessary and morally just. The war dragged on, costing hundreds of thousands of lives. He faced constant criticism, political opposition, and personal grief, including the death of his beloved son Willie in the White House. Yet he persevered, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to the Union and a remarkable capacity for empathy and forgiveness, even towards his enemies. His leadership was defined by his strategic vision, his resilience in the face of immense pressure, and his ability to communicate the profound meaning of the struggle to the American people. His words, often simple yet profoundly eloquent, rallied the spirits of a divided nation. In November 1863, he traveled to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, to dedicate a national cemetery on the site of one of the war's bloodiest battles. His address there, delivered in just over 2 minutes, would become one of the most famous speeches in American history. It redefined the purpose of the war, linking the preservation of the Union to the core ideals of liberty and equality for all, ensuring that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Clue number 5. 16th U.S. President. Issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Gave a famous 2-minute speech at Gettysburg. Part 6. Victory, re-election, and the tragic end. As the war entered its final phase, his leadership faced its ultimate test. He ran for re-election in 1864, in the midst of a brutal war that many believed was unwinnable. Public morale was low, and his re-election was far from certain. However, key Union military victories, particularly Sherman's capture of Atlanta, turned the tide. He secured a second term, a powerful mandate from the people to see the war through to its conclusion and to begin the monumental task of reuniting the shattered nation. His second inaugural address, delivered in March 1865, was a remarkable display of compassion and foresight. Instead of triumphalism, he spoke of malice toward none, with charity for all, laying out a vision for a reconciled nation, urging healing rather than retribution. Within weeks of his second inauguration, the long, bloody conflict finally came to an end. On April 9, 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The Union was preserved, slavery was effectively abolished, soon to be codified by the 13th Amendment, and the nation could begin to heal. The weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders. He began to plan for reconstruction, aiming for a generous and swift reintegration of the Southern states back into the Union. He spent his final days envisioning a peaceful future for a reunited America, a future where the wounds of war could finally mend. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel final act. Just 5 days after Lee's surrender, on April 14, 1865, while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., he was assassinated by a Confederate sympathizer named John Wilkes Booth. The nation, having just emerged from 4 years of war, was plunged into an even deeper mourning. His death, at the very moment of victory, transformed him into a martyr for freedom and the Union, forever etching his name into the pantheon of American heroes. His legacy is immense. He led the nation through its darkest hour, preserved the Union, and set millions free. His speeches are enshrined as masterpieces of American rhetoric, his character defined by honesty, perseverance, and profound human empathy. He remains a towering figure, a testament to the idea that a man from the most humble origins can rise to shape the destiny of a nation, overcoming unimaginable odds to stand for what is right. He transcended his time to become a symbol of unity, freedom, and democratic principle. Clue number 6. Re-elected in 1864. Advocated for reconciliation in his second inaugural address. Assassinated at Ford's Theater in 1865. Part 7. The Grand Reveal. He was the lawyer from Illinois, the rail splitter, the leader who battled a divided nation and emerged victorious, only to be taken too soon. His words echo through time, his legacy built on the very foundation of American ideals. The Unnamed Biography belongs to none other than Abraham Lincoln. Did you guess correctly? How early did you figure it out? Let me know your first guess in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Unnamed Biography for more historical puzzles. Until next time, keep those history books open.